Welcome to Village Talk Podcast with hosts Courtland Jones and Shauna Felton King. Village Talk highlights the views and voices of the community. And now your hosts, Courtland Jones and Shauna Felton King.
Welcome. This is Village Talk, where we highlight the views and voices of the community. I am Shauna King, and I am here with my co-host, Courtland Jones. How are you today, Courtland?
Hey, Shauna, how are you? Good to see everybody.
It is good to be back for another episode of Village Talk and to continue our conversation. You know, we just like to chat about some things that are impacting us and maybe impacting our listeners. And I think today's topic, really will touch on some things that some people have really been dealing with during this season. And we're going to be talking about healing or the journey towards healing today. And, when you think about the word healing, Courtland, what first comes to mind when you even think about that word?
Well, to be honest with you, I would say earlier in my faith walk, I guess I always imagined healing to be this instantaneous thing that happened, something that just kind of, from the Bible's perspective, and then immediately or suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
I would say now, after living a few years, I see healing as a process, much like a journey. It's not an overnight thing, an instantaneous thing. And for some, it may be, but I'm thinking that more often than not, it's a progressional thing.
Okay. And before you get to that, because you're right, when you think about it, is it being I'm healed, as in period, like you said, one time something has happened and it's one and done, or is it like what we're calling this show, the journey towards healing, where it's it's fluid, and when we get to that. Are we talking about, just physical things here? When we talk about healing, what types of things? I mean, because someone may say, well, I ain't broke. This show doesn't apply to me. There's nothing broke about me. I don't need to be healed from nothing. What types of things come to mind when we're talking about people being healed from something?
I would say mainly the things that I think about on this particular topic: emotional healing, mental restoration, recovery from traumatic events like childhood events, and not just like relational impacts,
right?
Like marriage, but also family. And then I think we'll get into this later, but loss, associated with grief. And that loss can be, again, related to like divorce, or it could be something significant. It could be something like a thing.
Yeah. And when you say that, I kind of think of two different things. I think of, sometimes you need healing from maybe some particular thing. There was a one-time event that may have happened. Something happened to you, maybe in childhood, maybe there was a life experience. There was some particular, a singular event that happened to you and, healed from the pain or healed from the hurt, the disappointment, of something. But then there also can be healing from something that may be a little bit more chronic or long lasting. Let's say you experienced something during your childhood. That was not a one and done. There was a series of something, or maybe it was being in an abusive relationship for an extended period of time, or even healing from, we can go here, your own low self-esteem or your self-worth, those types of things, which are long-term that you're dealing with it as a process. So it can be, there was one thing that happened to me and I need healing from that. Or is this like a lifelong journey or a time frame where it's like, I need healing from the time that I dealt with this? Either one of those, I think probably all of our listeners can think of, probably fall into one of those categories at some point in their lives. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And even as you're talking, I'm thinking of the self-sabotage, healing from the types of behaviors that keep me in a state of limitation and lack. And that really could be the result of an unforeseen or a particular circumstance or situation that I'm really not facing or not ready to face. And so it leads to self-sabotage behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when we think about, we've talked about this before, what kind of led us to this topic, because, we kind of try to stay in tune with what we're hearing and talking about, even with our own colleagues and family and friends. Why this became a topic is because people are going through right about now, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. And in listening to you, even again, because we've talked about this prior, but you have your own journey of experiences. But then, like, even in talking with Dr. Porter before the show, you could be experiencing trauma because of your relationship to someone else. And learning to cope with that reality, the grief associated with someone else's misfortune.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was doing well or doing fine until this happened for someone else. Because the Bible does speak, right, of mourning with others who mourn.
Absolutely.
And that caused me to realize there's no way you could get through this life always being happy for that simple reason. If I care about other people and they're hurting, that alone would prevent me from being happy all the time.
Right. And if you think about even, so you can have, many of us have dealt with maybe loss that has been, right in our own backyard, in our families and people who we know. But even, when we look in society and we look at, when we lost Kobe Bryant, and then today, as we're recording this, I saw this morning that Bobby Brown lost his son. And and that even you don't even have to be a fan of his music or any of those types of things, but there's going to be something inside of you that hurts.
Yeah.
When you see and you empathize with someone who has lost so much.
Yes.
And so it just seems to be there's this season that all of us are in where, even if the grief, the loss, the trauma is not in your house,
right,
you have to feel the remnants of it around you, and therefore it impacts you. And so how do we begin to heal from those types of pains, emotional types of traumas and triggers that we're dealing with is really what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah. Two things come to my mind listening to you as you say that. I have a friend, she lives in Oklahoma. I was watching The Butler. And in watching The Butler, because if you watch that movie, if you've seen that movie, there is a lot of grief going on in that movie as the father and the mother, played by Oprah Winfrey, they're coping with the challenges associated with raising their oldest child. And during the civil rights era and all of the things that they're concerned about with his well-being, and then the loss of the younger child to war. And so watching that movie on this particular day, for a moment, I could have some measure of sense of pain my friend in Oklahoma was going through, who had just lost her husband. I'm not saying that I could understand her pain, but in that moment, I did, on some level, get an understanding or sense of the pain that she might be dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think about Redskins fans.
Did you go there?
Well, I'm a Steelers fan, so I don't know this type of grief. However,
well, my husband's a Dallas fan, and he ain't doing too great either.
Well, the number of years they have languished in mediocrity and disappointment on a scale that as a Steelers fan, I am so, accustomed to winning. So, we get spoiled.
Right.
One game, we all in a tizzy and frustrated. But when your favorite team is just constantly losing, that level of grief. Granted, I know I just transitioned talking from about the death of someone's husband, but I do believe that grief takes so many forms as it relates to loss.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a football fan and a fan of a football team, there is emotion associated with these losses.
Right.
And the fan feels it just as if they were losing something personal to them.
Right. And if you want to go there, Courtland, if you think about, like you said, whether it's the sports team or whether, during this pandemic, many of us have lost time, or we've lost, depending on, if you're a business owner, you may have lost business, you may have lost you may have had family members who passed away. But also, let's think about it on the election level. Oh. There are some people who are having difficulty, right, dealing with loss. And no one is excited about dealing with loss. But when it comes to acceptance and how do we show that we're moving in the way of accepting and dealing with our grief. And, we don't have to get into Kubler-Ross's stages of grief and all that type of stuff. If you may be familiar with that, but realizing there are stages, and, we want to be able to look and say, how am I recovering? How am I processing through this? Am I healing? Is this going in a forward direction? And I do want to give the disclaimer: Courtland nor I are therapists or anything like that. We are just talking about this. But even realizing, when some people may say, you know what, I need to seek help. Yeah. Is that taboo? Is it taboo to say, you know what, I'm not dealing with this, and I might need to see somebody? Is that okay in our community to do that?
Well, you and I have known each other long enough. I will say it this way. I remember you talking about a study you had watched and read about how when you do the scan of a brain that's being affected or impacted on an emotional level, and what happens when the person is able to verbalize how they feel, and immediately that activity that's intensified in color begins to dissipate quickly when the person goes from keeping it all in to verbalizing how they feel.
Right.
And I've gone through enough in life myself. I can see and feel the difference as well. And I would say my journey towards healing as it relates to my childhood, because I've talked about divorce on this show, that I've gone through divorce. Divorce triggered my trauma from childhood. The emotional impact of the trauma I experienced as a child of sexual abuse was triggered when I went through divorce. And what I mean by that is the emotion associated with what I went through. I started feeling the trauma of my childhood. Mm-hmm. And it caught me off guard. Literally, I could tell where the emotion was coming from. I started to, not literally, but I could visualize and see where the emotion was coming from. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of surprised by it. But with that being said, I remember having a conversation at this time with a student on the high school level. And they were like, Mr. Jones, I understand the things you're saying about dating and how you got to let go and move on, and how you got to kind of work through it and not go backwards. But I don't know how to do that, Mr. Jones. What should I do? And I said, I think a good thing to do would be to start journaling. And I can tell you, it's like it happened yesterday. The moment I said it, I sensed God saying, well, you could do that too.
Right.
And so since 2003, I've been journaling since 2003, because I felt like that was God's way of saying, yeah, you need to start doing that yourself.
And that was like an aha moment for you.